and welcome. You're watching Head to Head on UATV. I am Oles Garjuk. Today we're talking about the relations between Lithuania and Ukraine. In Kyiv, the EU member state is called Ukraine's biggest ally. To talk about the economic cooperation and investment support to Ukraine, we are joined in the studio by Marius Janukonis, Lithuanian Ambassador to Ukraine. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Janukonis, could you evaluate the ongoing transformation of Ukraine?
I think we can observe a significant progress in Ukrainian reforms. The process, which is hugely supported by Lithuania, but also by the European Union, by another institutions and donors. Of course, we understand very well that it is a lengthy process. Of course, people would like to feel results of the reforms immediately, but all the difficult reforms, they take time, and we know it by our own experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, lately Ukraine has had some misunderstanding with neighboring countries concerning educational reform, for example, and also there was some misunderstanding with European high-ranking officials. What is keeping Lithuania's trust in Ukraine?
I think in the issues, like you mentioned, with the neighboring countries, the dialogue is always the best way, the best solution, and I hope that Ukraine will maintain close dialogue and close discussions with the neighboring countries in solving these issues, mostly related to the education of national minorities in Ukraine. I would say that Lithuania is a traditional strong supporter of Ukraine, a traditional partner. You know that our countries are united by a long history, which dates back to many hundreds of years. And our relationship, I think they have been very consistent over the course of the history.
Very stable.
They were stable. We had no major problems, no major misunderstandings, and especially after 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and de facto occupied part of Ukrainian territory, I think there is a new wave of solidarity in Lithuania, a new wave of strong support towards Ukraine, because your security is also our own security, and Ukraine is extremely important country for Europe in terms of security and development.
Well, talking about security, just recently President Petro Poroshenko visited Vilnius, meeting his Lithuanian counterpart Dalia Grybauskaitė, and one of the issues discussed was the reform of Ukraine's defense sector according to NATO standards. So could you please explain us what does this mean in the cooperation with Lithuania?
Indeed, Lithuania and our NATO allies, they invest a lot into transforming the Ukrainian defense and security sector, including training your armed forces. Lithuania is very active. It has sent around 40 military trainers to Ukraine, and we established an entire national training mission in Ukraine. This is the only our military mission abroad. And of course we are providing other assistance, also expertise on the strategic level. Our advisors are working together with other NATO countries in providing these reforms. And we see a clear commitment by the Ukrainian government and leadership to move steadily towards NATO standards. I have to say, we have to admit that this process is not so easy, because on one hand, because of the military actions which are taking place in the eastern Ukraine, unfortunately they continue, and of course internal transformation of the Ukrainian army, it takes time, but On the other hand, we see a lot of progress. If we compare the state of Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian defense in 2013 or 2014, there is a huge progress, and we are happy to contribute to it.
Well, we're very grateful for this contribution. Lithuania, as far as I know, is providing also Ukraine with the lethal weapons aid costing 2 million euros. What are details of this?
There was a decision of Lithuanian government to provide this kind of assistance, and I think it will be implemented in the near future in cooperation between Lithuania and Ukraine defense ministries. And I think the military knows more details about it, but it's the weapons or ammunition which our army doesn't use anymore.
Okay, and another issue I would like to discuss is the Marshall Plan, because Lithuanian politicians try to rescue Ukraine, and they're creating the Marshall Plan. What's your forecast about it? Because recently it has drawn a lot of controversy in Europe.
Indeed, our several prominent Lithuanian politicians proposed an idea of so-called Marshall Plan for Ukraine, but now officially we called it New European Plan for Ukraine. But there are clear analogies with the Marshall Plan, which was proposed for Europe after World War II. Mm-hmm. And the main idea behind this plan is to try to focus and accumulate additional resources to put them for the economic growth in Ukraine. Because
what are we talking about? What are the additional resources?
It is subject to discussion, which we are actively conducting with our Western partners and also with the Ukrainian government, because the implementation of the plan is our joint mission. Ukrainian and international partners, European Union, firstly, European Union institutions. Mm-hmm. And it's quite a complex structure, which has not very often been implemented everywhere. So we need to create an efficient, transparent mechanism which could supervise such assistance and also select projects and manage all the process. Mm-hmm. And we, according to our estimations, our experts say that international institutions could generate an additional 5 billion euros a year for Ukraine, but of course this money, this assistance should meet certain conditions. Of course, we have to discuss it with the Ukrainian partners, because efficient implementation of this plan is not possible without progress in certain reforms and without meeting certain requirements.
Of course, but why would you think European Union would be interested in developing such a dialogue, basically rescuing Ukraine and sacrificing a lot of money?
I think it's natural, because Ukraine is clearly defined as a strategic goal integration into the European Union, and Ukraine is an eastern neighbor of the European Union, and we see EU institutions and structures as bearing the main responsibility for making Ukraine successful, so for making reforms in Ukraine successful.
Mm-hmm. Is also European Union afraid of having Russia as a neighboring country?
I think European Union is realistic about it. Russia is also an eastern neighbor of the European Union, but I think European Union understands very well all the possible threats and the aggressive nature of the Russian policy, which is unfortunately taking place now.
I would like to focus on the reforms that Ukraine is going through right now, and especially about the medical, educational, and the pension reform. How does Lithuania see these steps taken in Ukraine?
I think it's a remarkable achievement that the Ukrainian parliament passed necessary laws for the reforms on the healthcare, also education. I think it's a big step forward. Implementation, as I said before, it is going to take time. Because such complex and such deep reforms, international practice shows that they take time, and you cannot see the results overnight. We know it by our own experience as well.
Well, so far we cannot really succeed in privatization process of state enterprises, and also in developing our own land market. What could be your recommendations on that?
I can speak from the Lithuanian perspective. Our economy is about 80% private one. I mean, private enterprises generates about 80% of our national product. And we started our privatization process about 20 years ago, and we managed to successfully privatize several large enterprises. We managed to attract foreign investment, and we think that the state should give up its role in managing a large part of the economy, because state is not always an efficient manager. So this is one of the principal rules of the market economy. And this is our suggestion to Ukraine. But of course, the right model, the Ukrainian government should choose itself. But we are a little bit concerned that the privatization process in Ukraine is running quite slowly. Some people say that it has not started yet. So we hope it will move ahead.
Well, we hope so too. Just there are some suspicions of protection of some oligarchs' interest in this process of privatization, and that is why the next topic of discussion would be the corruption in Ukraine, because lately European partners would not be happy about the process of fighting the corruption. What does Lithuania think about this, and what was happening in your country fighting corruption?
On one hand, I think the privatization is a good tool to increase transparency. To increase transparency and to diminish influence of interest groups into the state affairs, into the politics. It helps to separate business and state interests. But also efficient institutions are needed to fight corruption. And Ukraine has established such institutions. Also European Union, the United States, other donors is helping quite a lot in this regard. And we are very much interested that those new anti-corruption institutions should remain independent. That they do not become part of the political game, and this is our very clear principle, and we hope very much that those tensions between certain law enforcement institutions in Ukraine that are taking place currently, they will be resolved soon. So independence of the law enforcement institutions from the political influence is a must.
Well, lately we have a big scandal around power division in Ukraine between opposition and between the current government and president of Ukraine. How do you think this could influence the ongoing reforms and ongoing progress in our country?
Of course, success of reforms is hardly imaginable without a wide, broad political consensus. As we did in Lithuania several times ago, in the throughout the history, all major political parties signed an agreement on strategic directions, on strategic goals. So, of course, in Lithuania we have political struggle between the different parties, as everywhere in the world. But our politicians, I can say, they are quite unanimous and united on the strategic goals, especially on the foreign and security policy, also on certain domestic issues. And I think it's a good example also for Ukraine, for Ukrainian political parties to reach such broad agreement on really important and strategic issues.
Well, let's hope that Ukraine will succeed in this, and thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
That was Marius Janukonis, Lithuanian Ambassador to Ukraine. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Olas Garjuk. Goodbye.